Welcome to the Beat Reporters Inbox presented by Edward Jones. I'm MLB.com's Indians reporter, Jordan Bastian, here to answer some of your questions with Brittany Zivzak sending them my way. So, ready when you are.
All right, so our first question comes from Zach, and he asks, why does Kipnis bat leadoff when he has been injured a lot this year and when healthy, hasn't really produced much this season?
Yeah, this was Kipnis' first game back off the DL after missing roughly a month and went right back into the leadoff spot. And he has struggled all year. He's kind of had a season that started and stopped, mostly due to injuries. And when he has played, he has struggled. But Kipnis has a track record, and he's had a track record of success as a leadoff hitter. And, you know, I think Indians fans who've been following his career have seen that he's had months where he has just put the offense on his shoulders. And he's talked about sort of that comfort level that he has when he knows he's going to bat in the first inning of a game. You know, he went 0 for 4 today. I wouldn't expect him to come right off the DL and just, you know, kind of hit guns a-blazing. So it might take him a little bit of time, but, you know, he's familiar with the leadoff spot. You know, Terry Francona likes to get him, you know, as many at-bats as possible because he is a rhythm hitter. And it really also doesn't disrupt the rest of the order, which Terry Francona really likes right now, which is Lindor near the top, Brantley 3, now Ramirez 4, followed by Edwin and Santana. You know, when Kipnis was struggling earlier this year when he came back, you know, they tried to hit him in the 6th hole and didn't have much success. So I think you're going to see him be continued to be worked into that leadoff spot, again, because of familiarity and to try and get him back on that role that the Indians really need him to get on.
Our next question is from Oliver, and he asks, since Boone Logan is likely done for the year, are there concerns with the bullpen lacking a situational lefty? Obviously, Andrew Miller will return, but is too talented to be considered situational.
Mm-hmm.
Will Tyler Olson emerge into that role?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons they didn't go get a lefty at the trade deadline, they were looking at other options, but one of the reasons they didn't was because of Tyler Olson. They were really impressed with what he did at AAA. I believe he held lefties to around a 130 average, and you know, he impressed him in the spring, and he's impressed him since he's been back here. So, obviously, while Miller's out, they're a little handicapped by only having one lefty in the bullpen in Olson. So they've got to rely on some right-handers who are also good against lefties. Shaw has good numbers against lefties this year. I think Nick Goody has some pretty good numbers against lefties. So there's going to be some mixing and matching until Andrew Miller can come back and kind of be that leverage weapon. As far as the situational guy goes, I think Tyler Olson is the guy they're really looking at. And down in AAA, they just signed Craig Breslow. You know, he had some bloated numbers with the Twins, but was overexposed against right-handed hitters. If you look at his numbers against lefties, I think he held him to a 200 average. So, you know, that's a nice depth option to have at AAA in the event that they want to bring him up later this year as a possibility.
And Taylor asks, what waiver wire additions, if any, will the Indians look to make? Is strengthening the bullpen something they're looking to do, considering the loss of Boone Logan, or will the addition of Craig Breslow, as you mentioned, to AAA suffice?
Yeah, I think Breslow, again, will be a good depth piece. I think getting Joe Smith at the trade deadline was a big help for this bullpen. You know, that will kind of maybe ease some pressure off of Brian Shaw, who's worked a ton of innings and has kind of had a rough go of it over the last month or so. So I think those additions really help the bullpen, especially now, as you can see, with Andrew Miller out. As far as waiver deadline additions, I'm not sure if bullpen will be the priority. I think they will continue to monitor what's out there. You know, I think Jay Bruce has been a guy that they monitored before the trade deadline. Depending on Lonnie Chisenhall's comeback, maybe they kind of look into that. But they also have to sort of balance the fact that Jason Kipnis just returned. Lonnie Chisenhall shouldn't be too far along, although we don't have a clear timetable for him yet. And obviously Andrew Miller's coming back and things like that. So they're going to have to balance all of that while they're monitoring the waiver wire. So I would imagine them to be active and exploring, but I'm not sure what they will be doing.
All right, and then Len asks, when Lonnie Chisenhall returns, who gets optioned to AAA? Is it more likely he's returning closer to September 1st when rosters expand, which would eliminate any need for someone to be sent down?
Yeah, it'd be easier to answer that if I knew more clearly what Chisenhall's timetable is. I think this has kind of gone on a little longer than we anticipated. He's still not in minor league rehab games. But September 1 is still sort of a long ways away, and it would kind of be surprising as we stand here today if it went that long. But again, they'll balance the makeup of that outfield. Bradley Zimmer's done a great job in center. Austin Jackson has done good as a complementary piece, done well. And Chisenhall can kind of pair with Brandon Guyer and right. You know, they've used Abe Almonte, who's back up with the team right now. And I would think as we stand here today, Abe Almonte would kind of maybe be the odd man out, given that he has an option, and him in right field is sort of Lonnie Chisenhall's role.
All right, and Nick asks, is Mike Clevenger's spot in the rotation in any jeopardy, especially after a rough relief appearance today?
Yeah, I don't think so. Again, with Josh Tomlin on the DL, it's a tricky situation. If we were still working with a six-man rotation here, maybe you'd evaluate it a little differently. But with Tomlin out for, I believe, 6 weeks, Clevenger's going to continue to get his chances. He was on a really good roll prior to today's relief outing and prior to his last start. I think he had a 1.3 ERA for a good stretch there. So he's the guy they've really been encouraged by, a guy who's getting a lot of major league experience this year. And right now he's in that spot where if they have an off day, and they can manipulate the rotation, he can go into the bullpen like he did for this stretch. But I think he's going to continue to be run out there as a starter right now.
And Dan wants to know what your favorite under-the-radar trade has been that the Tribe has made.
That's interesting. If you're looking at the current roster, Carlos Santana comes to mind. He was a prospect when they acquired him. This year, you got like Nick Goody, a guy that was DFA'd by the Yankees to clear room for Aroldis Chapman, I believe, when they reacquired him. So the Indians acquired Nick Goody for cash, or a player to be named later, and Goody's kind of, found his niche in the bullpen right now as a low 2 ERA, great strikeout numbers, and the Indians have sort of found success in getting relievers in that way. Dan Otero comes to mind, Scott Atchison a few years ago. So I would say right now, as far as this past offseason, that one kind of stands tall.
And Travis is asking, can Trevor Bauer continue his strong pitching?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you look back to what he's done since May 30th, when he had his 14 strikeout game, he and Roberto Perez really narrowed his arsenal to focus on fastballs and curveballs and heavy curveball usage. And since then, he's been a lot more consistent than he was earlier this season. And I would expect him to sort of still focus on that approach, mixing and matching his other pitches as weapons when needed. That approach has served him well, and I think it should continue.
And Brian is asking, with the influx of young, talented infielders, could Kipnis be moved to the outfield in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I wouldn't see it as an immediate move, as you mentioned, next 2 to 3 years maybe. But he is under contract, and it's a situation where we've seen it while he was out. When Jose Ramirez goes over to second base, or when Eric Gonzalez plays second base, you're getting great defense. And then when Gio Urshela is at third base, it's elite defense. Urshela's made some just absolutely jaw-dropping plays, and Terry Francona's talked a lot about it, where even if they're not sure what some of these young players are going to bring offensively right now, when they have that confidence that they can consistently catch the ball and make strong defensive plays, that really helps when it comes to run prevention. So, when you look at the makeup of this roster, some other guys coming like Yandi Diaz, who was up here earlier this year, I mean, it's possible to see a scenario where Jason Kipnis could move to the outfield. Again, I don't see that as an immediate move. They've discussed it in the past, and it wouldn't surprise me if down the road they discuss it again.
And the next question is from Ben. He asks, when the season started and Kipnis was on the DL, Yandi Diaz was the choice to start the year at third base and was seemingly not at all in the conversation during the most recent Kipnis DL stint. Is there something going on with Yandi, or is it more about how Urshela performed in AAA?
I think it's more about the defense, as I just mentioned, that reliability where if they aren't sure what's going to be there offensively, they want to know that they're going to have that run prevention. It really plays up the pitching staff, and also just puts them in a position where they can limit big innings and big situations. We saw it the other day with Urshela, that jam with Trevor Bauer on the mound where fields a ball and throws home, and it was a critical play that helped Bauer escape that inning, an inning that could have really spiraled out of control, and without that play, maybe that turns into a loss. So, I think those are things that they really weigh, that defensive value, and I think when it's a short stint like they thought it was going to be for Kipnis, that defense was the priority, and I think that's where Urshela came into play.
Nikki's asking, how will the Indians do with their upcoming road swing?
Ooh, the upcoming road swing. It's a long trip. I think it's 11 games in 11 days. It was going to be one with an off day, but because of the rain out in Boston, that was tough. So you're going in to play the Rays. You're playing Boston for one game, and then they're going to head to Minnesota and Kansas City. And Kansas City at the tail end of that, when the team's tired, has been on the road for that long. I mean, the Royals are going to be sort of circling that series and looking forward to having the first place Indians in town for that, and trying to make a move. I think it's going to be an important road trip. Those long road trips are always tiring. West Coast swings are the worst, as we saw with the 1-5 trip, San Francisco and Oakland. So maybe it's a little more localized trip. It won't be as big of a deal, but definitely an important trip on the schedule.
Okay, and then our last question is from Michael, and he asks, what does Bradley Zimmer have to do to earn a full-time starting gig?
Well, I think Bradley Zimmer is almost in a full-time starting gig right now. I mean, what Terry Francona's done and what he's done so well with other players. I mean, Naquin was third in Rookie of the Year voting last year, largely due to the fact that his offensive production was maximized as a platoon player. Lonnie Chisenhall has made a career out of having his offensive production maximized as a mostly versus right-handed pitching player. And I think with Zimmer right now, it's a similar situation where he's going to play against lefties when it makes the most sense to Francona, when it's a little more matchup favorable. And also they know that the defense he brings and the speed that he brings can make up for even if he's a little mismatched at the plate. So I think we've seen him grow into, almost a full-time job. And I think he'll continue to get more looks, but it certainly helps that Austin Jackson is flipping over walls and making catches and has hit about 400 since he came off the DL. So mixing in Austin Jackson hasn't been, the worst of ideas for Francona right now. But I think we'll continue to see Zimmer gain experience and gain at-bats. All right, well, hey, thanks for tuning in to the Beat Reporters Inbox presented by Edward Jones. I'm Jordan Bastian. Stay tuned for the next one with another MLB.com reporter.